It's 8 o'clock. This is the UK Tonight. Coming up, the longest-running miscarriage of justice in British history. The astonishing story of Peter Sullivan. He spent 38 years in prison for the murder of 21-year-old Diane Sindel on Merseyside. Today, he wept as the Court of Appeal quashed his conviction. Incredibly, he says he's not angry or bitter, and his relatives say their thoughts are with the Sindel family.
We haven't won, Peter hasn't won, and neither is the Sindel family. They've lost their daughter, they're not going to get her back. We've got Peter back, and now we've got to try and build a life around him again.
Coming up, we ask why it's taken so long to clear Sullivan's name and how he adjusts to life as a free man after almost 4 decades behind bars. Also tonight, a 21-year-old man remains in custody over arson attacks at properties linked to the Prime Minister. 2 homes in North London were targeted within 24 hours over the weekend, one of them being rented to a member of Sir Keir Starmer's family. Detectives are also investigating whether his old family car was set alight too. Plus, a family search for answers. I'll speak to the father and brother of Nathan Osman, who was found dead in Benidorm in September. Originally declared an accident by Spanish police, the investigation has now been reopened after evidence uncovered by Nathan's family. And we'll find out what M&S customers should do to keep themselves and their money safe after the retailer admitted that shoppers' data was stolen in that massive hack 3 weeks ago. Well, that's come and much more on the UK Tonight. It's believed to be the longest-running miscarriage of justice in British history. Peter Sullivan spending 38 years in prison for the murder of 21-year-old Diane Sindel on Merseyside in 1986. He always maintained his innocence, and today, thanks to new DNA evidence, his conviction was quashed by the Court of Appeal. The time he has lost, it's impossible to comprehend. But today he said he is not bitter, and what happened to him should not distract from what he has called a heinous and most terrible loss of life. Our chief North of England correspondent, Greg Milam, has this report.
It's taken nearly 4 decades, but Peter Sullivan finally left prison a free man. Not angry, he said, not bitter, just ready to live out the rest of his life in peace. It is a constant reminder for the people of Merseyside, a memorial to Diane Sindel, it says, and all of our sisters who've been raped and murdered. It is nearly 39 years since Diane's body was found in an alleyway nearby. Her killing still haunts people here. A 21-year-old, soon to be married, and killed with such brutality in the middle of town. She left her part-time job at this pub on the Wirral. What happened to her led to the biggest murder investigation Merseyside police had ever launched. 8 weeks later, police arrested unemployed labourer Peter Sullivan. Now, 38 years after he was convicted, that conviction's been quashed. It's thought to be the longest miscarriage of justice in British history. New tests of DNA evidence showed someone else was the killer.
In the light of that fresh evidence, we allow the appeal on ground 1. We quash the conviction.
Peter Sullivan listened to that on a video link, his family expressing their relief.
We haven't won, Peter hasn't won, and neither is the Sindel family. They've lost their daughter, they're not going to get her back. We've got Peter back, and now we've got to try and build a life around him again. So at the end of the day, we feel sorry for the Sindels, and it's such a shame that all this has had to happen in the first place.
He didn't know which way this was going. He's now got to come out. He's going to find things so different when he gets out here. He's got a long way to go.
On Merseyside, it's brought up memories, not least for those questioned in the original investigation.
Well, he did door-to-door inquiries, and he came to me, where were you on such and such a date? And I said, I don't know. And then, of course, different police came in to interview. But in fairness, they have to turn, every stone, don't they?
Merseyside police have now reopened the investigation.
There's clearly a lot of work to do now in continuing those advancements in DNA. If that person whose profile we're seeking to identify is deceased, we want to identify that because we clearly want to seek justice for Diane.
Justice for Peter Sullivan has taken nearly 4 decades to come. The search for justice for Diane Sindel goes on. Greg Milam, Sky News.
Well, let's speak now to journalist and lecturer in criminology at Brighton University, John Robbins, who joins us now. John, good of you to join us this evening. The question so many of us are left with tonight is, how was he not released earlier? How has it taken this long?
Well, it's a shocking miscarriage of justice. It's really, just devastating to hear what's happened, as I heard in your report. There are cases which are very similar to it. I'm minded of a case called Andrew Malkinson, which is kind of creating a lot of concern about the way the criminal appeal system works at the moment. And that's shone a light, the Malkinson case has shone a light on this organisation, the Criminal Cases Review Commission, which is the miscarriage of justice watchdog body. And we now learn today that the CCRC looked at the Sullivan case back in 2008 and comparisons with the Malkinson case, where the CCRC actually rejected Andrew Malkinson's application twice. And there's another echo of another shocking and recent case, which is Victor Neeland. So conceivably, the Andrew Malkinson conviction could have been overturned, I think, just trying to remember, 14 years earlier if the CCRC had kind of gripped it earlier on. And the same with the Peter Sullivan case, that could have been gripped and overturned a lot earlier, back in 2008. So, yeah, again, we're seeing further scrutiny of the CCRC.
Andrew Malkinson, wrongly convicted for rape. Andrew Malkinson, you're referring to there, spending 17 years in prison for a crime he didn't commit. That was a high-profile case and story that we covered here on Sky News, and there are echoes of that here. In terms of the Criminal Cases Review Commission, that really is the only channel for those who feel they have been wrongly convicted. And it's been described as an organisation, as a system that is in a state of complete collapse.
Yeah. I mean, if you are wrongly convicted, then you begin your kind of fight for justice by applying to this organisation in Birmingham. And typically every year about 1,600 people will write to Birmingham. Many of them, most of them will be prisoners. And every year the CCRC will send a small number of those cases back. So those people are concerned about the performance of the CCRC because those numbers have just crashed over the years. So in 2016, just a dozen cases, less than 1% of the total who applied that year were sent back. And again, in 2018, 13 cases. And that kind of prompted the concern about the performance of the CCRC over the years. And we're kind of seeing that in the analysis of the CCRC. And we're kind of at a particular moment in time, because last week there was a debate in the House of Lords about the state of the CCRC, and we saw a former Lord Chancellor, a former Solicitor General, and a former Lord Justice of Appeal, all kind of supporting the contention that the CCRC was in a state, of complete crisis. And that's just kind of simply extraordinary. So kind of the Peter Sullivan case, as shocking as it is, needs to be seen in the context of real problems within the criminal appeals system.
The point has been made today that if he's always insisted that he was innocent, he didn't murder Diane Sindel, but if he had pled guilty, he'd have been out earlier. And a lot of people are thinking about that today. This is a man who knew he didn't do it and spent 4 decades behind bars. He's now coming out in his late 60s and, as he said, looking at what life he can build from the driftwood, as he put it, through his statement given by his lawyer, the driftwood of his life. Can you talk to me about what kind of journey he has ahead of him? Because, again, people will think, well, he'll be compensated, won't he? He'll be helped. What is the real picture for somebody who leaves prison in these circumstances?
So we just kind of discussed problems within the criminal appeal system, and then he kind of move on to what happens when people have their convictions overturned, and the assumption is people will be compensated for the lost years, but that is not a given. And actually, it's a scandalous situation whereby there's been a change in the law back in 2014, and you have this ridiculous situation. And hopefully Peter's case will highlight the ridiculous nature of the situation, where if you are an innocent person, you're wrongly convicted, you're one of the very few people who actually manage to get their conviction overturned, you almost certainly will not be compensated. To be compensated, you have to prove your innocence beyond a reasonable doubt. And that phrase, beyond a reasonable doubt, is a phrase that lawyers and your viewers will recognise. The prosecution has to prove the guilt of the defendant beyond a reasonable doubt. But because of this ridiculous law change back in 2014, that's now a standard placed upon innocent people wrongly convicted. And the point is, it's very difficult, impossible to prove that you did not commit that murder 25, 35, 38 years ago. So it's created this insurmountable hurdle for compensation. So many people who've been wrongly convicted have been denied compensation. It's kind of turned off the tap. And I mean, I do have some figures on this. So in 2002 to, just look at my notes, between 2007 and 2009, between 2020 and 2023, the Ministry of Justice paid out just £1.3 million. If you compare that to between 2007 and 2009, £21 million was paid out. That just kind of illustrates the kind of degree to which kind of funding has been cut off for people who are hugely vulnerable, massively traumatised. Being in prison for something that you did not do is inevitably hugely traumatic. It wrecks lives. The chances of rebuilding are very small.
Yeah, well, we got a hint of that. Again, Peter Sullivan speaking through his lawyer saying he couldn't really talk about the trauma of what had happened to him in prison. So many awful things that he couldn't go into, too many to mention. And there's that to deal with. There's then adjusting to the modern world, 40 years behind bars. Is there any support in that sense? It may not be monetary, but is there something else there to help him?
Well, there's very little. I mean, I've interviewed people over the years from the Irish cases, the Birmingham 6 and the Guildford 4, who, were convicted a long time ago, through to cases like Sam Hallam and Victor Neelan, who took their compensation claim to Strasbourg a couple of years ago. And when I interviewed Victor Neelan, he told me how he had nothing waiting for him. He literally left prison with a kind of a bin liner full of his possessions and £46, which is the grant that former prisoners get paid, and they're just left to cope by themselves. It's just a devastating gap in the provision that you'd expect. These people have been damaged by kind of state error. They've been damaged by the legal process. They've been damaged by botched police investigations. I mean, Peter Sullivan, I understood, was interviewed and made his confession in the absence of his lawyer. And I'm very much minded of another case of Oliver Campbell, a vulnerable man who was made a confession in exactly the same kind of situation. He had his conviction only overturned last September, and he almost certainly will not get any compensation. It's a terrible state of affairs. It really does urgently need to be addressed.
OK. Well, John, thank you for speaking to us. John Robbins, journalist and lecturer in criminology at Brighton University. His thoughts there on the Peter Sullivan case and, of course, the Sullivan family. Keen to remind us that, of course, the family of Diane Sindel still waiting for justice, and another family hugely affected by what has happened today. Thank you so much for your time. Now, the Scottish Parliament has this evening voted in favour of legislation to introduce assisted dying for terminally ill adults. It is the third time Holyrood has voted on this issue, but the first time MSPs have voted it through. Let's get the latest. Our political correspondent Ali Fortescue has been following this story for us this evening. Ali, bring us up to date.
I mean, Sarah, I think the first thing to say is this is obviously hugely consequential in Scotland, but it's consequential in Westminster as well, because the bill on assisted dying in England and Wales is, I think it's fair to say, a pretty precarious position. It got a majority of 55 votes, but I think had Scotland voted against assisted dying today, that would have been a moment that would have been watched here in Westminster, would have made the progression of that bill perhaps a little more precarious. But on what is going on in Scotland, I mean, obviously incredibly important for people living in Scotland. As you say, this is the third time the third time that members of the Scottish Parliament have voted on assisted dying, and it has passed 70 votes to 56, so a margin of just 14. I should say there were, and I should firstly say that this is the first stage, so this does not mean that this is automatically going to be law. We have seen already that the debate can become fraught from here on in, but there were also very public opponents of this bill, including the First Minister John Swinney, his deputy Kate Forbes, his predecessors Hamza Yusuf and Nicola Sturgeon. Nicola Sturgeon talked about the potential for internal coercion, but the Scottish leader and the Lib Dem leader were both for the bill. As I say, it has passed, a big consequential moment, but as I also say, this is where the challenges and complexities can begin as it goes through Parliament. And I should say that the bill here in London, in Westminster for England and Wales, is coming back for report stage this Friday. So assisted dying very much on the agenda and a very significant moment in Scotland today as it passes that first hurdle.
Ali, thank you. Ali Fortescue with the latest on that story. Now, a 21-year-old man has been arrested over a series of arson attacks on properties and a car linked to the Prime Minister. The Metropolitan Police have confirmed counter-terrorism officers are leading this investigation. Sky's Alice Porter has the details.
This was the moment firefighters tackled a blazing car in North London. The vehicle had been owned by Sir Keir Starmer's family and was parked only a few doors down from where he used to live. Neighbours told us they initially thought the car's battery had exploded when the fire began in the early hours of Thursday. But the incident is now part of a counter-terrorism investigation into alleged arson attacks on properties linked to the Prime Minister. 4 days after the car fire, Starmer's family home was allegedly attacked, a scorched entrance, evidence of suspected arson. It's understood the property is currently being rented out to a family member. And almost 3 miles from where these two fires took place, there was another fire on Sunday in Islington at a property linked to Sir Keir. 1 woman was evacuated. Fortunately, no one has been injured, but counter-terrorism police are leading the investigation. A 21-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of arson with intent to endanger life in relation to all 3 fires. Politicians on all sides have condemned the suspected attacks.
Nobody wants to see violence in any form, not just in a democracy, in the whole of our country. This is obviously an ongoing investigation. The police have my full support in the investigation that they are undertaking. The Prime Minister has thanked the emergency services.
It's not the first time Keir Starmer's house has been targeted. Last year, 3 people were found guilty of public order offences after pro-Palestinian demonstrations outside his home. And it raises more concerns for MPs' safety following the murders of Joe Cox and Sir David Amess.
I'm extremely concerned about the incidents. We're waiting ducks right now. We're just waiting for the next one to happen. In recent years, we've seen 2 politicians killed. And today we've had an incident with the Prime Minister. Why are these people being allowed to get so close to them? The Prevent scheme was meant to be monitoring the guy that did it to my dad. What monitoring did they do? Nothing, because they allowed him to carry out the attack. So it's extremely concerning. And I don't know what it will take for somebody to stand up and say, we need to do an inquiry and we need to increase the security.
Counter-terrorism police are leading the investigations into these fires and say they are treating them as suspicious. But any motive on the alleged attacks is as yet unclear. Alice Porter, Sky News.
The Chief Executive of Thames Water has defended his £195,000 bonus awarded to him for his first 3 months in the job. Chris Weston told MPs that he had made a difference, but admitted that England's biggest waters company could still fall into public ownership. Our political correspondent Liz Bates caught up with him in Westminster.
Weston, we're from Sky News. Can we just ask you a few questions? That was a difficult performance in front of MPs. Is there anything that you have to say to Thames Water customers? What about to customers? Because a lot of customers are very disappointed in your performance and the performance of Thames Water. Chris Weston, do you think it's appropriate to continue to pay yourselves huge salaries, to take big bonuses? You took a almost £200,000 bonus in your first 3 months in the job. Do you think that was appropriate? And do you think that helps people to be reassured that you're changing culture within Thames Water?
Everything to the committee.
What about customers?
On record for the committee, and I would advise that you then go and look at that.
Chris Weston, the impact though is on customers. Do you not think that you owe them an explanation for the failure of this company? Chris Weston, are you going to be able to save this company?
I will save this company.
Why is it still taking on debt and paying out huge salaries and bonuses? That's the question, because that's what got you to this point, isn't it, Chris Weston?
Just watch your back. You're gonna.
That was the problem in the first place, though, wasn't it? Is this the problem in the first place? Was taking on huge amounts of debt and then paying out big salaries and bonuses and dividends. That's the crux of the problem over the past decade. And not investing properly.
That's part of the problem, and we have said everything to the committee in answering their questions. So I suggest you look there.
Liz Bates asking the questions there. Still to come here on the UK Tonight. We'll find out what M&S customers should do to keep themselves and their money safe. This is after the retailer admitted personal data was stolen. Also ahead, a family's search for answers. I'm going to speak to the father and brother of Nathan Osman, who was found dead in Benidorm in September as authorities reopened their investigation into his death. And find out how QR codes are fueling the online drug trade.
Show of military might and menace. Why should the West trust you?
Frankly, I don't care whether the West trusts us or not.
Sky News. Get the full story first.
Have a quick word for Sky News. Is the West right? Are you fueling Russia's war machine? American journalist Evan Gershkovich is on trial here, but was first on display.
I'm Ivor Bennett, Sky's Moscow correspondent.
Hello, welcome back. Now, Marks & Spencer's say some personal customer data was stolen in a recent cyber attack on the firm. The retailer saying the information may include telephone numbers, home addresses and dates of birth, but no payment details or passwords. So the question is, how can M&S customers keep themselves safe after this hack? I'm sure many people have loyalty cards or have ordered from them online, are concerned about what happened. Let's speak to IT and cyber expert Ian Thornton-Trump, who joins us now. Ian, good of you to come on the programme tonight. First of all, it's worth reiterating what we know about what happened, because it all still seems pretty confusing. M&S might not even know properly themselves yet.
Well, I think they're working really, really hard to figure that out. They certainly have suffered a significant economic loss due to the situation. I certainly also think that their customers are quite upset with them. And I have some anecdotal evidence that it certainly seems to be the case. But I think to contextualize this properly, this can happen to any large business with a public profile And it's a great wake-up call. Also, personally, my heart goes out to the cybersecurity folks that are working at M&S and wishing them the very, very best to restore services as quickly as they can.
Yeah, they'll be under pressure and working hard, I am sure. The effect on the company, clear, as you said, losses. What about the effect on customers? M&S have been very clear that no payment details were taken. It was things like date of birth, home address, your name, for example. What kind of harm can that do to customers for hackers to have that information?
Yeah, so this is what we call excellent intel for pretexting attacks. A pretexting attack is where I know enough about you to possibly trick you into doing something. And we've seen this with a number of different types of cyber attacks, including a recent one that I was involved in the investigation of, which was targeting elderly folks in terms of the winter fuel subsidy that the government is offering and getting them to try and put their payment details into a web form that the bad guys had set up. And I think what the bottom line here is that it is good news that payment details were obscured enough that can't be used for a direct attack. But the personal details could be used for that type of trickery that we see all too often.
Here's a question for you. I mean, M&S won't be the only big company being targeted by hackers. And it feels like you can't do anything online anymore without giving over the three basic bits of information: your name, your personal home address, and your telephone number, your email as well, for good measure. That information, for all of us now, is all over the internet. So just how valuable is it?
I think it can certainly be combined with other data that might be available, healthcare data, tax returns, to create a situation where, again, you're tricked by a talented social engineer or a phishing email. They tend to say, the perfect phishing email arrives at the worst time, when you just quickly glance at it and you click on the link because you think you're getting a package delivered. Yeah. So I think it's an ever-present threat. And this is the new reality of the fact that have to be forced to rely on the electronic infrastructure, the cyber infrastructure in our daily lives.
M&S customers, what should they be looking out for in terms of, if they're worried and they think that their information may be used essentially against them, what should they be looking out for over the coming months?
Well, I have basically 3 words of advice for them, is that if a text message arrives on your phone, pretty much ignore it. Because it is probably likely going to be some sort of phishing attack. The second thing is hover before you click. If it looks weird, if the URL looks like a keyboard smash, if there's something that's dodgy, it's probably dodgy, right? And the last thing is pay attention to your bank details and make sure that you can account for the transactions that are happening on your account. The beautiful thing about living in the UK is that you pretty much get an immediate notification every time you pay for something. So if you're out and about and all of a sudden one of those notifications appear, get in touch with your financial institution immediately.
Okay, really good advice there. Ian, thank you. Ian Thornton-Trump there, IT and cyber expert at CISO Inversion 6 UK. Thank you for your time tonight. Thank you.
You're very welcome. My pleasure.
Right, still to come here on the programme, I'm going to speak to the father and brother of Nathan Osman. Nathan was found dead in Benidorm last year as the investigation into his death is reopened by Spanish authorities. The family of a man who was found dead in Benidorm have persuaded Spanish authorities to reopen their investigation into his death. Father of four, Nathan Osman, was found at the foot of a remote cliff on the outskirts of Benidorm less than 24 hours after he had arrived on holiday with his friends last September. His family believe others may have been involved in Nathan's death and say attempts to use his bank cards were made after he was found. Well, Nathan's father, Jonathan, and his brother, Lee, are with me in the studio now. Thank you so much for coming in. And I know this is really difficult to talk about, so we'll just take our time through this.
Yeah.
I've just given people a brief outline of what happened there. Nathan in Benidorm, first foreign holiday with his friends. Lee, perhaps you can tell me the first you heard that something was wrong.
Yeah, so the afternoon, the 28th of September, we were worried because Nathan was missing for the period of time throughout the day. We assumed maybe Nathan likes to sleep, you know. He's been up for 48 hours, having worked the night shift on the Thursday, gone right through. You know, he was very fatigued. Alarm bells rung. It got to around 4 in the afternoon. My mum and dad, they knew straight away, you know, something is wrong here. They then decided just to fly out. They knew something was up. Having spoke to the friends that he was with, there was no sign of Nathan at the hotel. And unfortunately, things took a turn for the worst where the friends were at the police station. They had a bag, which was Nathan's, and he had to be identified from the tattoo which he had the day before on his torso of his son, Romy. Then we were alerted from that piece of evidence that it was Nathan. You know, it absolutely shook us. This doesn't happen to us. And yeah, we're absolutely broken from it.
Nathan was found at the foot of a remote cliff on the outskirts of Benidorm in the opposite direction and some distance from the hotel he was staying at with his friends. The Spanish police said it was a tragic accident and they closed the case with little investigation or support for you as a family. Now, Jonathan, this didn't sound right to you, did it?
No, no. Not to us, not to anyone. It was just, you don't leave to go to your hotel and then they find you like an hour's walk away up into, it's just the wilderness.
And you know your son. You know your son, you know he's sensible.
Yeah, he was...
He knows he's got his head screwed on.
Yeah, he was pretty streetwise. He was always out with the kids walking, you know, he's on the beach or at Brecon, you know, in the waterfalls, always walking. So, he knew how to, you know, be outside and be sensible, and he was sensible. But...
he was a family man, not a party animal, which is, I think, what you as a family want to get across.
Yeah. Completely, yeah. I mean, we had to plead with the Spanish authorities that when me and my sister went over there to speak to the chief of Guardia Civil in a board meeting, we had to plead with them that Nathan wasn't your typical Brit going there to get, you know, extremely drunk and everything that comes with it. Nathan was only gone for 2 days. He jumped on with his friends last minute, and he had a great time, you know. And from what we've got back from the friends, from his phone, we could clearly see that he was there having a great time.
You had very little help from the Spanish authorities, and you and your sister, Lee, decided to start your own investigation to find out more. And you found out quite a lot, information that the police, you could argue, could have found in the hours, days after Nathan's death. What is it you uncovered?
So, from the start, not just being biased because he's my brother, but me and my sister, we knew that there was foul play involved because of the distance of where he was taken in such a remote area. His bank cards were used the following morning. We then pursued any possible evidence from the boys' reports that he was with, from the police reports back in the UK, from then pushing with the local MP to get and gain his access to his report from here, from Spain. And I looked through endless hours of CCTV of the Benidorm CCTV that goes live on a daily basis, and found my brother at the end of the promenade, walking carefree with his phone. Just no distress at all, really relaxed. You could see he's clearly trying to find his way home. And that's the last sighting that we have found. We've created a complete, detailed investigation of his timeline from the moment he's left the house, because we believe that it's significant to include that he was up for 48 hours. On a normal night out with him, he'll go home midnight, 1 o'clock, pushing it. And we've looked into every minute of that case, of that timeline, to put to the Spanish authorities and to the courts.
And you've taken this to the Spanish authorities and they have reopened their investigation. Jonathan, I want you to tell me about Nathan, because we've seen some wonderful footage there that your family have provided of him with his 4 children.
Yeah.
And this was a man at the age of 30, he was going on his first lad's holiday. This was a family man. This was somebody who was sensible. He was going away for a brief break with his mates, planning to return home to his kids. Tell me about your son.
But like we said, he was only from Friday to Sunday. Nathan, if the closest to perfect you could get. As a son, he was loving, he was faithful, you could depend on him, he'd do anything for anyone. He was, I know he's my son, but if you wanted a perfect son, he was as close as you could get. You know, he was funny, he'd never moan, he was a good worker. Children he lived for, and everything. It was just an adventure all the time with him.
He'd brain box, wouldn't he?
Yeah, and intelligent. We went, I think it was last week, a week before, where he worked. His ex-employers, they had a memorial garden, and they had a bench made with his...
It's all right.
With his name on. But everyone just thought so much of him. That's all. He was... His funeral, it was hundreds and hundreds of people in his funeral. People that I know that have been funeral directors for 20 years said they've never seen as many people. Boys from school, everything. He was just, yeah, he was just working, you know. And I went on his LinkedIn, you know, account the other day, and it's as long as your arm, all the qualifications he had. You know, he was a welder and a fabricator. He was just so intelligent and always wanted to learn more. He'd done college, university. What more can you say about him? Yeah. He was funny, you know what I mean? He used to, well, just to wind up everything, you know. Every April Fool, you knew you could count on Nathan, he'd have it.
Wow.
Like, just so many stories, you know, but, yeah, he was just a wonderful soul.
Well, the impact on your family is clear. And he's left behind 4 young children. And I can't even begin to imagine what that is like for you as a family, to have to put your arms around those 4 young children and tell them that their father isn't coming home. And I know that you're here tonight because you feel that Nathan and the life he lived deserves answers. You don't know what happened in the final hours before he died. You want to get to the truth and you want to create awareness? Because, you know, from the investigation that you and your sister have done, Lee, you feel like this isn't an isolated incident in that Spanish resort. There have been deaths in other similar circumstances, which for you raises alarm bells because you feel that the police aren't taking the deaths of young revellers in Benidorm seriously.
Not at all.
Yeah, there's just a number, and then it's on to the next. And these cases are shut down within days, hours. We are trying to represent and put spotlight, not just us as a family, but there's so many others in our situation that have had to come to terms with a conclusion that is so far-fetched to the truth that they've had to put up with that and had to accept that, because we only believe what, you know, comes from a higher source, from the authorities, and we put everyone puts a lot of trust into that. But for us to have to go through our own investigation in so much detail, to go through the coroner report, the extent of the injuries, you know, for us to do that as a brother and sister, to represent our parents, no one should have to go through it. And
you shouldn't have to do it. It's people employed, professional people, that's their job to do it, and they just haven't done it.
Well, your local MP and Justice Minister Alex Davies-Jones has been involved in your family's fight, and I understand that you're meeting her tomorrow. You have, through your own hard work and sheer grit and determination for your
We've got to say a big thank you to her.
Yeah,
because,
the wheels are back in motion. You're meeting her tomorrow.
Yeah.
What is it you feel you want to seize on now? Because the investigation has been reopened. You have your local MP's attention and focus. What is it you want to happen from now?
Well, the reason we kind of contacted her was desperation, because we were having trouble finding out things. Nathan's case file we couldn't get hold of, but there was nothing in it anyway. It was the coroner was having trouble. They were contacting, you know, the Foreign Office and just being told, oh, sorry, nothing's available. So you got the coroner asking us for help, because we seem to have more, everything the coroner had, we had supplied it to him through, you know, and everything's in Spanish. So what they've done is just unbelievable. But like you said, the MP now is involved. I only phoned the office, and you know, I told them they said coming in, we'll have a chat, and everything has been like bump, 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 and it's just without them, we'd still be searching. So I think it's, you know, the MP getting hold of her kind of counterpart in Spain. Like my daughter, she emailed everybody, the chief, the mayor of Benidorm. But like I said, it's happening every day.
Well, listen, you shouldn't have to, but you're making noise and it feels like things are happening. I'm really pleased to be able to give you the platform tonight to talk about Nathan and what happened to him and to highlight the failures that you as a family have experienced in trying to get answers and justice for him as well.
Yeah.
Good luck. We'll speak again, I'm sure. Jonathan, what a wonderful family you have, 2 amazing sons, and I know your daughter and your wife are behind set watching you.
Without them, like you said, we would expect to just go home, or it's accident, and be forgotten. But no, they've dug heels in and no.
You didn't do that.
Oh, no.
Your son deserves more than that. Listen, Jonathan Osmond and Lee Evans, thank you so much for coming in. And
thank you very much.
Thank you,
We'll keep in touch and we'll follow your progress.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Well, we did ask the Spanish police to comment on Nathan's case. They didn't get back to us. But as I said, we will be following this story closely here on the UK Tonight. Much more coming up after the break. Stay with us.
I'm Dominic Waghorn, Sky's International Affairs Editor, covering a world that seems to be unravelling. War, unrest, revolutions.
It's not his country, it's ours.
They have succeeded for the first time in their country's history in removing a leader from power.
No freedom!
Sky News, the full story first. There was fighting here, but there's clearly now a lull, and they're using it to bring up more ammunition. This is a mass exodus in which Russia is hemorrhaging some of its brightest and its best. According to the local weather channel, there have been more than 2,500 lightning strikes and flash flooding, all on top of this week's lethal tornado. What stays with you most in this job is some of the people you meet. What is your worst fear about what the Russians want to do to the children?
They're just boosting demographics by stealing young people.
Would you like to take the opportunity, Mr. President, on Sky News to invite Barack Obama to come here? Mr. Trump, are you running for president? Can you confirm it?
We're going to take a look, a very serious look.
On that day, we saw your fighters killing women, killing children. Was that a mistake? Did you go too far? You couldn't control your fighters? The full force of the state is being used to crush any protest. Free wherever you get your news. It's half an hour now past the deadline that Hamas issued, and we've now seen a third barrage of rockets coming in.
Another alarm. The mood here is jittery and nervous.
We're seeing the world get more and more divided, and it's our job to try to make sense of it all.
Welcome to the world.
Our new podcast, starting now. It's very exciting. Every week, we'll be reporting from the world's trouble spots.
We get to hold those in positions of power accountable, and we get to ask the questions that the audience, the listeners, want to know about.
And that's why it is so important that people tune in, come along for the road, come along for the journey. It'll be fun.
Hello, welcome back. Coming up, why plans to demolish Goodison Park have been scrapped. First, Teddy is here with a look at more sport. Teddy, we're matching today.
I know, it's good, yeah. I'm glad you got the memo.
Got the spring blue memo. We're talking about Andy Murray. The honeymoon period is over for his latest relationship. What was it, a year, 18 months?
6 months.
6 months?
So Novak Djokovic, yeah, since November.
Felt a little bit longer than that.
You used the word honeymoon, but it felt like a real romantic story, didn't it? Great rivals, born within a week of each other, multiple Grand Slam winners, huge, playing each other in finals. But then a few months of Murray retiring after last summer's Olympics, he announced he'd be coaching Novak Djokovic, or part of his team. He's been very keen to stress he's not the only coach. He felt a bit embarrassed that people drew a lot of attention to it. But today the news is by mutual agreement, they will not be continuing. Djokovic had a little bit of form and fitness issues, but they did get to the Australian Open semi-finals before Djokovic had to retire injured, bidding to become record 25-time Grand Slam winner, would be the oldest man ever to win a Grand Slam singles title, but hasn't done it in this romantic partnership with Murray. And I suppose from a media perspective, we're all rooting for him to go all the way to Wimbledon, centre court, both former winners. He could have got his 8th title, the 25th overall, with Andy Murray in his corner, but it's not to be. But they've been very praising of both of each other. Murray says it's been an unbelievable opportunity.
They were gushing. I think the romance is alive and well.
Yeah, it is.
Away from the court.
It is. Unbelievable opportunity, Murray called it. Djokovic was very... It's interesting, the nuance of it, saying he's very intelligent. He was really surprised by how intelligent Andy Murray was, and he was able to share insights with him, not only about tennis, but life, and that Murray just was very tactful the way he approached it. So hopefully it's a really good launch pad for Andy Murray as a coach, but won't be with Novak Djokovic. But it just remains now 2 years since his last Grand Slam singles title, won the Olympics last year. Andy Murray turns 38 on Thursday. Djokovic is a week Thursday, a few days before the start of the French Open. No one's that old has won a Grand Slam singles title in men's tennis, but, you know, I think maybe Murray will help him a little bit. So we'll see it, but it's a great story come to an end. We'll keep across Novak Djokovic's swan song, I suppose, in his career. Up next, though, Championship playoff semi-final news. Coventry or Sunderland it'll be.
Staying connected is vital for business. Sky Business sponsors this report.
Dowling's idea about coaches is an interesting one. 42% of Premier League first-team coaches across the last 6 seasons have been English. 56% have been British. The Premier League are also committed to coach development, launching an elite coaching plan in 2020 with a clear philosophy: better coaches lead to better players. Through that, they've supported 480 coaches and coach developers over the last 5 years. Alongside that, there's the Professional Coaching Partnership, bringing together the Premier League, FA, EFL, League Managers Association and others to offer further support for coaches. The League Managers Association, which represents managers in our top 4 divisions, told us they run a significant number of qualifications and personal development services for English coaches, all of which are oversubscribed, they say. But they admit that the football industry in this country is competitive, volatile and short-term. They say increased foreign ownership of English clubs and the purchasing power of English football.
Sky Business sponsors this report.
Right, continuing with the sporting theme, and Goodison Park is potentially going to become the permanent home of Everton women from next season. It could be safe from the bulldozers. The club had planned to demolish the 132-year-old stadium, with the men's team set to move into their new ground at Bramley Moor Dock this summer. But after a review into the feasibility of maintaining the stadium as a home for the women's team, the owners opted to continue operating Goodison Park. Is going to become the largest dedicated women's football stadium in the country. What an accolade for Everton Football Club. Let's speak to the secretary of the Everton FC Heritage Society, Richie Gillam, who joins me now. Richie, Everton fans can dry their tears because it looks like Goodison Park's here to stay.
Yeah, it's great news that we'll be able to carry on that pilgrimage, and fans from all around the world who are going to transcend on Goodison on Sunday will be able to still do it before they go into the new stadium and down in the Docklands.
It's a real statement of intent from the club, isn't it, about the women's team? Because there have been some headlines recently of other football clubs who perhaps haven't been supporting their women's team as much as they should or as they could recently. This is a real landmark moment for women's football, led by Everton.
Well, I think Everton, as you said, it's going to be the first purpose stadium for women's football. But Everton have led the way on many things, and they famously had over 50,000 in the ground for the Dick Kerr ladies game at Goodison Park and smashed the records then. So much so that the men's game sort of got a little bit scared of it, and the women's game disappeared a little bit. But yeah, I think it's fantastic. Our new owners have got experience with Roma and what they're doing with Roma, and they've led them to some great success in the last couple of years. So hopefully there'll be another Everton's team from the ladies' side who'll have some more silverware coming.
Yeah, talk to me about the ladies' team and how they're doing.
I think obviously over the last 6 months or so, they've responded to the support they've got from the club, the additional players they've got, and you could see it in the back end of the season. I think a couple of more wins and we'd have been well up the table, maybe fighting for any sort of European places. But I think we're not that far off from being a top 6 team.
Yeah, and what a boost this will be to have a stadium of their own. How do you think this will push them on next season? Not just in terms of performances on the pitch, but everything that goes on around it outside, you know, attracting new fans, filling that stadium.
I think they've got quite a fierce fan base anyway. They made Walton Hall Park their own, and I think they'll take that into Goodison Park and hopefully attract more fans. And it'll definitely, hopefully, bring more of the demographic in across the board to watch the women's game as long as they do with the men's game.
Well, Richie, really good to talk to you tonight. Some really good news for the women's game, and in particular, the Everton women's team. That's Richie Gillam there, Secretary of the Everton FC Heritage Society. Pleasure to talk to you tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye now.
Time now for a quick look at the weather.
The ideal atmosphere, whatever the altitude. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
The risk of heavy showers will ease through the rest of this week as dry, warm and sunny conditions dominate. However, a cool breeze will affect eastern coasts. Thundery downpours across southern counties of England, Wales and Ireland, along with showers in Northern Ireland, will fade to leave a mostly fine evening. That leads into a mostly dry and chilly night with clear skies, though the odd shower may affect the southwest. Some mist and low cloud is going to build across eastern Scotland and the northeast of England. For most of us, Wednesday will bring another dry, sunny and warm day, although the brisk winds down North Sea coast will keep it cooler in the east with some patchy cloud. There'll be a few showers breaking out across the south of Ireland and southwest of England.
Breathtaking views with clear skies ahead. Qatar Airways sponsors the weather.
That's all from the UK tonight. We are back tomorrow night at 8. Up next, it's The World with Yalda Hakim live from Riyadh. See you tomorrow.